Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Shea Dixon. Shea, we are here in person because we had some technical difficulties, but
That's okay.
we're
It's
back.
better this way.
Yeah, it's better, and a lot to talk about. We'll have a transfer portal podcast, and we're gonna right now have a signing class podcast with LSU's 2025 class. Clearly, one that's been talked about. I mean, we've obviously talked about it for a year plus at this point. The 2025 class had a lot of hope, has a lot of hope, is a very, very good class, top 10 class in the country, top 7, 6, somewhere in there, depending on where you go. Where do you start when assessing just the class overall? Obviously, top guys, DJ Pickett, Harlem Berry, Solomon Thomas, a flip from Florida State, Carius Kern, Charles Ross. Where do you start when kind of evaluating this class?
I'll add too that on the On3 industry rankings and On3 they finished number 7, but they're right on the heels of others. But there's still a February signing day, and I don't mean that as much of LSU adding more people. They are still after Bryce Baker, the North Carolina.
Said Bryce and then paused, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, not
But
that
yes,
Bryce.
Bryce Baker.
Bryce Baker, who has been committed to North Carolina but didn't sign because of Mac Brown no longer being the coach. Now Bill Belichick's moving in, but he's looking at LSU Penn State, so we'll see what happens there. But I point to it because the rankings still have one more update. And I think that puts together all of the end of senior seasons, which a lot of LSU guys played very well.
Yeah.
That puts together all-star games, which LSU guys are in. And it is that final version of what a class ranking is. For instance, Carius Kern, we don't have 32 5-stars yet, but we will. Carius Kern's ranked 20-something in the country right now, but he's a 4-star with On3. When we expand it to 32, he'll be a 5-star. So LSU's adding another 5-star that's already signed. They flipped a 5-star on signing day in Solomon Thomas from Florida State. But yes, the class isn't done, so I still don't rule this out as potentially, maybe, a top 5 class. We'll see how it all shakes out in the end. I mean, all these teams are sitting at 91.5 and above.
Decimal places.
Tennessee, LSU, Michigan, Ohio State. You move past any of that into the 92s, and you're already into the top 5. Yeah. So still shake up left in terms of what the final rankings look like.
Yeah. And you talked about obviously flipping Solomon Thomas, but then holding on to DJ Pickett. If you want to just shed some light into that process and how that eventually comes out and the impact of keeping Pickett in this class.
Massive, especially considered that there was the Underwood fallout. They were on a 3-game losing skid, and we knew all along that Pickett, Miami, Pickett, Oregon, Pickett took a late visit to Georgia. But when you step back, Matty B, he never really, nor his father, who did a lot of on-the-record stuff, DJ, is much like Corey Raymond. He doesn't talk very much. So his dad did all the talking. But was there ever a time that his dad didn't say, hey, look, DJ knows where he wants to go. He's firmly committed. I don't think that'll change, and we feel good about it. And there was buzz that it was going to be that LSU was 3rd when he committed. And I said, no, they're going to get him, and they did. And then there was buzz, oh, we'll watch for Miami in the end. This one had no worry. By Sunday when he left campus, and signing day was Wednesday, it was done. DJ Pickett is all of 6'4". Yes. That's when I asked Brian Kelly kind of, because of all these guys you see in this class, he's the one that jumps out that when you look at him, you're like, oh, wow, like that is legit size. Yeah. And kids can say, it's infamous that colleges will, or, it's well-known colleges will list a 6'2" guy as 6'4", and you're like, okay, that guy's not, or a 6'2".
5'10" at 6 foot.
They do it in basketball. Yeah. They do it in football. Yes. But I asked Brian Kelly what he thought the first time he saw DJ Pickett, and the first thing he said was, oh, wow, he's actually legitimately 6'4". And this is a player who's coming in to start immediately.
Yes.
I think the view is, and we'll get to the portal pod, you guys will be able to catch that, and Jakeem Jackson coming out of Florida was the number 3 corner in the country. When Corey Raymond found him at Florida during those 2 years on staff, Jakeem Jackson was a 3-star. By the end of the process, On3 had him as the number 3 corner in the country, and Corey signed him. Started a couple games, got hurt, and ultimately Matty B decided, I'm just going to take a red shirt instead of coming back and burning games, and I'm going to transfer. And he hit the portal on day 1, immediately took an LSU visit. I don't think he's got any others planned. My point being, you lost Cade Phillips, a 5-star, on signing day. That burned. Mm-hmm. About 2 hours after that is when Jakeem Jackson went in the portal.
Yeah.
I think that you're looking at a situation where next year you can have DJ Pickett as your number starter at corner. Mind you, Zy Alexander isn't here anymore. And God bless him for all he did of 2 years of coming from Southeastern. He was their best corner, tore his ACL, came back, and was their best corner again. And not just their best corner, one of the best being graded out in the country. Yes. So hopefully he finds an NFL landing spot. I think he will. But Pickett, then Jakeem Jackson, a transfer. You can move Stamps to nickel. Mm-hmm. Then you've got P.J. Woodland. Then you've got Michael Turner, who they've been bringing along. Then you've got Aiden Anding coming out of Ruston, who is certainly the number one corner in Louisiana and
Great
can
athlete.
play early. So suddenly you feel a lot better about the corner room than you did when there were a lot more unknowns than knowns.
Yeah, for sure. Just kind of going through, obviously offensive line was a big thing. Mentioned Thomas, mentioned Kern. You go down the list of offensive linemen.
Yeah, Tyler Miller. Well, they signed the number one O-lineman out of two border states in Arkansas and Mississippi with Curious Kern and Tyler Miller. You go into Florida and you flip a 5-star from Florida State and Solomon Thomas on signing day.
Yes.
And then in state, you get Brett Bordelon, a legacy, who was the number 2 offensive lineman in the state. He'll play guard. I think you've got to start with Curious Kern. Charles Power, our national director of scouting and rankings, called him the most athletic O-lineman in the cycle and one of the more athletic ones in recent memory. Yeah. This is a guy who's 300-plus pounds, doesn't really look it, and is cutting front flips and back flips. Like Brian Kelly said on signing day, if there was anyone at any position that's coming in and starting right away, he circled Kern, which was not a big surprise. I think he finishes as a 5-star for On3, but it's no different. I think people hear that and are like, uh-oh, a freshman starter. Well, so were Will Campbell. So was Emory Jones. Yeah. Curious Kern is held in higher regard than both of them right now in terms of where he's finishing in the rankings. So, or right up there with Will Campbell, I should say. Yeah. But he could be a guard for you. I love the addition. And with Emory Jones going pro, they're losing 4 of their starting 5 guys. So it's massive to get a guy like that in early that you think can probably start right away.
Yeah, Kern was my number 3 player in this class.
Who was 1 and 2?
It was Barry 1, Pickett 2.
Well, let's get to Barry.
Yeah, we could talk about Harlan Barry forever. I mean, I remember seeing this guy in camp. What was that? 3 years ago? 2 years ago at this point. Whenever it was as a freshman.
We were there the day he got offered when they pulled him aside. It seems like so long ago.
And it's just you see him as a prospect and you're like, okay, this guy moves differently. And I know that it doesn't sound like anything in particular, but it's just he moves like a guy that, I mean, they've compared him to Reggie Bush. So when you watch him, it's like you're watching Bush. You're watching like Barry Sanders, and those are like incredible names, but like the balance he has, the agility, the ability to make people miss on just naturally, you don't see that. And he is the number 1 running back in the country, and he is the best running back I've seen. I mean, in person, especially at one of these camps in past, and I've done this 4 years now. Just from day one, he was incredible, and I'm glad that he's in this class now because he's amazing.
He's On3's number 1 running back. He's going to go wire to wire as On3's number 1 running back, and Charles Power started out with the Jamal Charles comp, which I loved.
Which is great.
Which I loved. Made it a bit more modern day here with Reggie Bush, a little bit more well-known type of guy. But he said Harlem's elite top-end speed, functional movement skills, and running style in the open field remind us of Reggie Bush. Also shades of Jamal Charles. Jameer Gibbs, he said, for the more modern kind of era. And then I think for Louisiana people, it was the late Joe McKnight. So what all those guys have in common? They're electric running backs who can also catch the ball just as well as whatever they're doing when you hand it off to him.
He could be an electric slot receiver.
No doubt.
I mean, the way the 7-on-7 we saw with Bryce Underwood, with all these guys, and he was that receiver, and he was winning reps, making contested catches. He's an all-around guy.
You're going to play him at running back and be able to do whatever you want with him, and that's mismatch central. And at the same time, bring in a top 10 running back in the country who is also from Louisiana, in J.T. Lindsey. And forever people thought it would be James Simon, who ended up going to Texas. And Frank Wilson pivoted and went to J.T. Lindsey. Mm-hmm. Well, J.T. Lindsey finishes ahead of James Simon in the rankings. I guess Frank Wilson, after all these years, is being tabbed as the godfather.
Knew something.
Knew a thing or two. And J.T. Lindsey is in the midst of an unbelievable senior year with Ash and their run to a state championship and through these playoffs and everything else, but he is going for 200 plus a game. He's catching it as well. So you take those two, you put him with Caden Durham.
Yeah.
you'll take that. Like,
you finally have the running back group that you've been kind of waiting on since I don't know when
and
exactly.
even if your run blocking may not be there at times,
Yeah.
these are the type of guys that erase that.
Yes, and Durham made progress in that area, but as receivers, we saw what Durham can do. As receivers, we know what Barry and Lindsey can do. Just this is the type of running back room that we've been waiting for LSU to have, really in a long time. I can't go back whatever 2019 room was, but like this is that type of room, and the versatility they have. I just think that's going to be huge, especially with the question marks we have of the offense and what they're going to address in the transfer portal. You don't need that at the running back spot. You have stars, and we know running back is a spot where you can play early, you can play often. Now you have three guys.
Caden Durham did it this year.
Yeah, and Caden Durham will be great once again next year, but Barry is going to get snaps, and Lindsey will get snaps as well. Both these guys will get on the field early.
You've made your O-line better, and you've really made your running back room better.
Yes.
In the past week with high school signees.
Yes.
One thing we wanted to point out as we go through this, we gave you the class ranking. I still think they may finish top 5 just because I think the final rankings across all the sites when it comes to the On3 industry rankings will be kind to LSU. Lots of guys had great senior years. They had the number 1 receiver in the country committed into Corey Moore. He ultimately went to Oregon. They had the number 1 quarterback in the country and player in Bryce Underwood. He flips to Michigan for a record NIL deal. And then they had another top 5 corner in Cade Phillips, a 5-star, who they flipped from Texas. And then he flips back to Texas the day before signing day. I think, it was an in-state school making a guy a priority. And at the end of the day, there wasn't much LSU was going to do there. We've talked about that, countering it with taking a guy like Jakeem Jackson, who was a number 3 corner 2 years ago, and being able to plug him in, already being an SEC starter for a couple of games before he got hurt. But I say that to say this. You look at the blue chip signees percentage, which is how many 4-stars and 5-stars you landed. Oregon, 95%, which is insane.
Yeah,
that's called an open checkbook.
And great
I'm not joking. An open checkbook by Phil Knight, but you still got to recruit to Oregon. You can't just go get kids from the Southeast to just go to Oregon. Yeah. So even if you got all the money in the world, Dan Lanning and them recruit great.
Yes.
95% blue chip signees is nuts.
That's nuts.
Number 2 on that list, Georgia, 86. They've dominated this list for the past 5 years as number 1. Oregon overtakes them. Number 3 on the list. What do you see, Matty B, on that graphic?
LSU is
LSU, 83% of the signees are 4-stars or 5-stars. So as On3 pointed out, they wrote it and broke it down as LSU being a top 3 in blue chip percentage. No short of frustration for the aforementioned reasons, but holistically, one of the best classes in recent memories, even with those departures. And we broke down the 5-stars and all these other guys. We'll touch on others, but even when it felt like, man, you lost, oh man, you took a hit here. I mean, 3 different 5-stars were committed who end up going elsewhere for a variety of reasons, and you still had the 3rd best blue chip percentage class in the country.
Yeah, I mean the external perception of LSU is on signing day. Brian Kelly couldn't stop talking about the NIL and how the money and how this is all going and stuff, and it just felt like you said overall fans and whatnot were like, oh man, this not disappointing, but it went from number 1 to number 5, number 6, whatever it was. When you look at the class as a whole, it's still a lot of players that should be able to make an impact. Even at receiver, where it was not like you said, more decommits, Meadows decommits, and flips, you still get, I think, Teron Francis, who was an immediate impact player because of his physicality and a guy who's been physically ready to play college football for a long time. He's not one of these development guys that needs 2 years to put on weight. So I look at Teron Francis as a potential immediate impact guy. And then I think you look at the linebacker position. Like, that's the next big headline of this class, which we could talk about. You want to do an ad read? Do we have any ad reads?
Oh, we do. Yeah.
Let's jump to one, and then we'll come back to linebackers in a minute. But that is probably the next talking point for me when I look at this class.
Yeah, my perfect franchise, Andy Luedecke. You guys know him well. We talk about it in the mailbag each week. But if you don't, Andy is in and has been for more than 20 years, 2 decades now. But has been a franchise owner, franchisee, and he's now sort of shifted to really put a big focus into sort of helping people through the process of what it means to kind of either start your own franchise, become a franchisee, or get someone in your family involved. Kids coming out of college don't know what they want to do yet. There's so many options out there that Andy has at his disposal that people just don't know about or kind of haven't talked about or thought about. But are you ready to leave that rat race for the American dream? This could be an answer for you. Is it a side hustle you're looking for? Andy said he deals with tons of that. Or is it just diversifying, building wealth, leaving a legacy, like I said, to whomever in your family, kids, whatever it might be? Andy can help. As a franchise consultant and owner, he's helped tons of folks at the Bengal Tiger over the years. No matter your skill set, no matter your financial requirements or abilities or what you have at the time, obviously, you have to commit to something. He's worked with everybody on every level of that. And because you listen to the Bengal Tiger and because we have linked up with him at My Perfect Franchise, it's free to give him a call and to talk through all this. So give him a shout. Here's his number, 404-973-9901. It's 404-973-9901. Or email him, Andy, A-N-D-Y, at myperfectfranchise.net. That's Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. All right, linebackers, you were saying.
Yes, linebackers. This is what has a lot of people excited, especially when you look at the linebacker position. I don't think it's a need in the transfer portal because you have Charles Ross coming in from Houston, who shot up the rankings, is now a top 100 player on the On3 industry rankings. Jaden Breaker from Georgia, clearly a talented guy there that a lot of people are very, very high on. And then Zach Weeks, who is the brother of Whit Weeks and West Weeks, and clearly comes in, I think, with some potential to play, and then as well as Keelan Moses and CJ Jim Coyley. And Jim Coyley can play like a safety linebacker.
Yeah, I think
depends where you kind of.
I think you play him at star probably.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
He
can really tackle.
Safety who can come downhill and be very physical.
Yeah, Jim Coyley can really tackle. 6'3". I liked his tape in that regard. Keelan Moses, I mean, turn on the tape of Keelan Moses. He's higher on my rankings than he is like on all the industry rankings, which I'm not like saying
he's a 4-star. Yeah, he's a 4-star.
I'm not saying he's a 5-star, but I thought he really has really good motor and really good ability to get in the backfield and make plays and can play that kind of disruptor role that Blake Baker loves. Like all these guys have a little bit of that in them, of that getting in the backfield and really creating havoc, which they're not as much. You see that with Whit Weeks. You've seen that at times with Harold Perkins. I think with Blake Baker's defense, you want that from your linebackers that have really good closing speed, have really good ability to see ball, get ball at times, and then figure it out in the run game from there. So Keelan Moses definitely checks that box for me. And then so what is that, 5? I mean, really 4, 4 and whatever we consider Jim Coyley. So 4 or 5 linebackers in this class.
I think he's a safety that plays star. But, 4 linebackers that are all 4-stars. And Jaden Breaker was one he flipped. Blake Baker flipped from South Carolina when he was a 3-star before his senior year. Suddenly he has a great senior year. Georgia tries to flip him. Bama, Georgia Tech, the local school. And he's stuck with LSU. I think that will be one we look back on as a pretty big addition if he's able to pan out with LSU. But it also, I think, Matty B, puts Baker in a position where he does not have to portal a linebacker.
Correct.
You've signed 4 high school kids. You've got a guy like Jim Coyley that can play star. And then you've, at the end of the year, gotten something out of Devon Keys that you feel like you can really build on from his true freshman year. So Whit Weeks, Animal, first-team All-SEC next year, watch out. Then more, I would say the Weeks brothers, more Weeks brothers are on the team, but certainly West will be the backup. You can then have Devon Keys or West there at that kind of Greg Penn spot that he was playing. We'll see what Harold Perkins does. I almost think Harold Perkins, if he does indeed come back, is going to play more of a star role.
Yeah, I would think so.
But behind them, Singleton, Talon Singleton's still here, obviously. Xavier Atkins transferred out, but you're bringing all of these guys in. It feels like it's in a spot where you're good. Let's turn the transfer attention elsewhere.
Yeah. So the linebacker class was good, and then defensive line.
Bo Davis's first year, he basically just took his board at Texas and just got all of the kids from it.
Yeah, Zion Williams is the first one I talk about, and there's a good amount of players in here that we can't talk about. But Zion Williams was one of my favorite players in this class. 6'4", 330, and I think immediately has just translatable size and honestly skill. I thought he was pretty skilled at his size and the way he moves. 4-star guy out of Lufkin. Zion Williams is my one of my favorite defense players in this class. So I start there with him, and then there's 3 more.
Yeah, they got a 4-star I think he's 4-star. Maybe one time he was in Brandon Brown, who was committed to Texas and flipped to LSU for Bo Davis. Dylan Battle coming out of Texas. Zion Williams coming out of Texas. The guy I like maybe most is Buddy Mathis Jr. And he's an industry 3-star on 3. Esmond is a 4-star, top 30 D tackle, but he is a player, and he's a bit undersized at kind of a shade under 6'2", but 285. But he can move, he can play, quick off the snap.
Yeah, he can
very
rush the
physical
passer.
at the point of attack.
Like a JVR Suggs almost.
Yeah.
Like in the way he can rush the passer and make.
And he's coming out of a Calvary Baptist Day School in Savannah, obviously, Georgia, that if you're familiar with Georgia, they're going to state titles and making deep playoff runs every year. They have like 7 kids on their team that are going D1, FBS. So a solid first haul these guys on defense were hired in January. You're so behind the 8 ball that Bo Davis was in a good position. He came from Texas to where it's like, we're recruiting a lot of the same people that I was at Texas to LSU.
Correct.
So I'll just pick right back up on that. And boy, did everyone try to flip these guys at the end, but they held firm and ended up signing them all.
Yeah, and Damian Shanklin off the edge, Kevin Peoples. I think he's the only edge in this class, or I guess technically edge in this class.
Jesse Harold had flipped to Florida State, but yeah, Shanklin.
Really, really high-level pass rusher, top 150 player in the country. Really like the tools that he has, and I mean, at 6'5", 240 or so. I mean, On3 has him at top 140 player in the country. I think that ranking is about where I would have him. I think that's real potential there off the edge.
Yeah, 6'5", 235, and whether it's On3 or 24/7 ESPN Rivals, everyone had him between 139 overall and 240 overall. So that's anywhere from the kind of a top 10 edge rusher to a top 20 edge rusher. And that's a really solid addition, especially coming out of a place you're not usually recruiting in the Midwest. But Kevin Peoples had some built-in relationships from recruiting guys at Missouri, same with Blake Baker. But a win for Peoples here. I think this is a solid ad, and they'll be after some edge guys in the portal, but they've got a good one in Gabe Relaford still that we're kind of waiting to see break out. So that gives Shanklin a little time to get adjusted and then see what we can they get out of him.
Yeah. 3 more players that I like, which we can wrap up just on this. I like Jace Thomas at safety out of Destrehan quite a bit.
Son of an NFL player, bloodlines are there.
Yeah. May need to bulk up a bit, but at 6'1", I mean, the incredible closing speed, I think he's not afraid to put his nose in there and make tackles, be physical, which is what we've been asking from LSU safeties for the past couple of years. I think he kind of checks that box, and then I think he has some coverage ability as well. So Jace Thomas is one I like. Phillip Wright, also out of Destrehan, top end speed. I mean, just awesome sprinter. Really gives them that top end ability that they've needed at receiver, and they are addressing at receiver. So it's always good to add in-state guys that are really fast and talented as well. And then JD LaFleur is my third one.
I like him a lot.
Clearly they're going to go get guys immediately that can help them, blocking and at tight end because the room is empty. But JD LaFleur, I think, has the ability to come in and fight for a spot, fight for snaps immediately because he can block at a high level. And then, honestly, I think his receiving ability might be underrated at this point.
Yeah.
I think the hands are very, very much there. He's not Mason Taylor. He's not going to, go crazy in that regard. But I do think the hands are there. The route running is there. Like you turn
maybe not. I mean, Mason Taylor was a 3-star, 88
true.
Back in the day. He wasn't
true.
viewed as a second round, top 50 NFL pick.
It's true. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if JD LaFleur came in and played right away in some capacity.
Probably be bad of us not to mention bloodlines here as dad David LaFleur. Yes, that David LaFleur, who was one of the best tight ends in LSU's history and went on to become a first-round pick to the Dallas Cowboys. So I'd imagine he's probably got some of that in him playing the same position. Love the upside there. And with Mike Tyler being committed and staying home in Columbia at South Carolina at the end of his process and moving his commitment to the Gamecocks, keeping J.D. LaFleur home in Louisiana was big.
Huge. Anything else on this class?
Look, I think from, again, the Bryce Underwood saga taught us all.
It's a new era.
It's a new era.
Yes.
Expect a big brother, in the words of Julie Chen, expect the unexpected. No one saw that number and how it played out coming, which very much when it was described publicly, it was like, oh, they just decided to go buy Bryce Underwood. Make it let's not lie about it. Let's just call it what it is. And yes, DeCorian Morris committed at number 1 point. He is the best receiver in the league. He's a freak.
He's very good.
They weren't going to keep him the whole time. I mean, whether it was Texas or Oregon, there were a million schools coming after him. But to be able to hold on to Pickett, which, let's be real, corner was the biggest need, and they get the number 1 corner in the country after hiring Corey Raymond back, to hold on to Harlan Berry, the number 1 recruit in Louisiana, I think was massive. And look, we went through an entire pod where we also didn't even talk about Jakeem Stewart, who reclassified and then ends up at USC, which some people thought might have been the 4th team in the mix at one point, but he reclassified, put it onto a small window, but it became evident he wasn't going to pick LSU, and it sort of wasn't even a conversation on signing day. So we'll watch from afar there, but I do think that you've got Guillory coming back. We'll see what they do through the portal, but you've signed some good D linemen here, and Ahmad Bro, Don McKinley, a former 5-star, like they're guys who are ready to step up, who played this year as true freshmen that are going to be carrying bigger roles next year. So Gio Paez is done, correct?
Yes.
The Wisconsin transfer. So I think you'll see those two guys really step forward. Shan done?
Harris Shan's done as well.
Done as well. So those two guys will be the ones you see step forward. They've got some others, obviously, and we'll see what they do in the portal. But I love this class. Like I said, we'll see where the final rankings have them, but just top to bottom, like when we're down here and saying the lowest ranked guys are Buddy Mathis, for instance, who I think might be the best D lineman they signed. J.D. LaFleur, who we love as a tight end. That's a Philip Wright, is one of your lower ranked signees, and he's a 4-star. That's how you end up with the number 3 blue chip percentage is you sign all these guys, and almost every single one of them is a 5-star or a 4-star. So in the wild, wild world of NIL and the portal and everything else, LSU sort of steered clear beyond the Underwood fallout of any more major damage done, and they flip a 5-star on signing day, which is nice to see.
You trade Phillips for Thomas and Solomon Thomas, and offensive line was
I love
a need
Cade
as
Phillips,
well.
so he's going to be a great player.
Yeah. So, love the class. Thank you all for joining us. Leave us a like, comment, share, subscribe if you have not already. Check out the Bengal Tiger On3 and come interact with us, come talk with us, come read all of our content, where we've had, obviously, stuff up on this class for the past, week now. So, check us out over there. Thank you all for joining us. We'll talk to you all later.